Hi, friends. Coop here. So I have a thing that's been kind of coming up, and maybe I'm a little bit late to this party, but for some reason, Wendy and I have become quite fascinated over the past few days on this whole thing, and that is this whole trad wife thing. So, um, I have a question about why there's all this hate that's being directed at these trad wives. So, Uh, I did go live a couple of days back, and I alluded to it. I mentioned it a little bit, but in my opinion, anyway, it seems to be more about the aesthetic. That nice, um, idealized image of Levittown. Post-war America, all the way through the 50s. Everything's nice and clean. Everything's uh, just beautiful. Every house has a beautiful manicured lawn. Every car has at least one car in the garage, and if you're really cooking with gas, you've got one television in your entire little Levittown home, right? Now, like I said, it's the aesthetic. And sometimes, and I feel like this could be directed into a few different directions. I'm an antique collector, and I am a classic car guy. And the reason why folks like us like to have an old car, or why we like to collect antique furniture, or for me, I have, you can see one of my many clocks right behind me, is because it's just cool. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with retro or being cool. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're harkening back to an era of oppression and misogynism, but these tradwife ladies seem to be bearing the brunt of a lot of this. I also think that there are some misconceptions about who these tradwives are. They go on social media and they push a narrative about not working outside the home and bending over backwards to literally make everything from scratch, to include the bread for the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, making the peanut butter themselves, making the jelly themselves. And they're doing this all in designer clothing without an apron. That's just not realistic. I mean, they're doing this as a full-time job, and it's not like these ladies are necessarily, the classic tradition of a Susie homemaker or anything like that. They clearly have at least one or two people on their payroll helping with the editing and all this other stuff. And if you don't think people like Nara Smith and SG Worms are making bank, then you might actually be wrong on this. Again, like I said, it's a narrative. And when they're talking about doing these things, I mean, if I try to make my own bread and then make my own jelly and then make my own peanut butter and then maybe make my own banana pudding on top of it, all from scratch, that would probably take me about 6 to 8 hours. That would be a full workday. And I certainly don't have the time for that. I mean, if you think anybody can do that, and then where are the kids? Where are they? They want their mothers to make their cornflakes from scratch. We're wearing Vuitton or Chanel outfits, not even wearing an apron. Yeah, I I'm dressed like I just came from the office. I took the tie off. I'm being a trad husband, and trust me, before I get to doing yard work, I'm taking all this off and I'm going right into uh shorts and a t-shirt, because I live in Florida. It's hot as all get up right now, and it just, I'm not, if I'm not going to do my yard work in a suit, and I've got a pretty cheap suit. This is all thrift store finds, cuz I'm still working on that. Maybe someday I'll get Armani, or maybe I'll start on the low end like Joseph A. Bank, and then maybe work my way up to an Armani suit. That would be kind of cool. But yeah, I'm right now. I just get what I can at the thrift store because I'm a working man. And it's kind of real right now. So it brings you to my next point. If these trad wives are selling an image that is completely unobtainable. I mean, you go to my house and look at my kitchen, and we keep pretty clean, but it is not what you see in these social media videos. You just don't. And so that brings me back to what I thought about management of expectations. That's a thing that we used to say in the military. There seems to be a problem with what the media tells us our lives should be, as opposed to how our lives actually are. I am an Xer, as is my wife and my first wife as well. And we can all tell you that between the three of us, we never thought for a second that we could just go to New York, quickly land a job as a journalist or as a interior designer or whatever else they did on Friends, and be able to split the rent with even two or three roommates for a penthouse on top of a skyscraper in Manhattan. Even in the 90s, that was not realistic. But that's an image that people would get from TV. And even back then, people would get depressed that they couldn't get to live per that image. And now it's even all the more worse because uh, just remember back to being a kid. You're influenced, you see what other people are doing, and you want to do it, but not everybody gets to be an astronaut when they grow up. And it gets even worse. I mean, we were getting that stuff fed to us from TV and from reading mom's Cosmopolitan magazines while we were certainly only reading it for the articles, not, looking at the models on every other page. Right. And then I thought about this about the whole social media thing, and I'm not even trying to be a social media guy. I'm just using this literally as my outlet to talk about what's on my mind. I've got 73 subscribers, and the algorithm doesn't even get me any views before I get embarrassed and take it down half the time. So uh, then you look at people like Mr. Beast, PewDiePie, um, Dude Perfect. Those guys, they're making money. They're doing this as a full time job. My favorite is Simon Whistler, but I imagine he's probably working 20 hours a day on his content because he's got something like I believe 10 channels now, and he's got something coming out really every day, and he has an entire staff in the social media. So I think while we were having dinner a few minutes back, Wendy looked at the fundamentals and found that SC Williams might be making $1,000 a month just on the TikTok. That's it. So, that for the amount of work that goes into producing that high quality content, I don't know if the juice is even worth the squeeze. Maybe you're hanging on to your dream, perhaps, if you're in that situation. I know I recently, about a month and a half ago, went to Las Vegas for the biennial. That means every 2 years, biennial, right? Just make sure everybody knows their Latin prefixes and everything. The when when uh, when Sean Kennel was up there on the stage telling us what you can expect to actually make for every video, you're really not making much, even when you've got a half a million, a million, even subscribers. The the glory days back about maybe 10, 15 years ago, I think those are past an opening. And now it's just another thing where anybody, literally anybody with basic computer equipment, all you need is a computer with a camera and maybe a halfway decent microphone like I have here that Wendy bought me, which is more optimized for podcasting, which is something I'm trying to do. But again, I just don't see where the money is in that. So again, management of expectations. Just be realistic. If you are aspiring to be an influencer, you've got to find something original, and you're not going to find it if you're trying to be like the Dude Perfect guys or that guy in Finland who him and his wife smashed things with the hydraulic press. That's an awesome channel, by the way. That's actually pretty funny. Uh, or or Mr. Beast. Now, uh, just trust me on this, okay? Now, the other thing is, kids are easily influenced by what they see. Just like back to how people of my age were maybe influenced by what they saw and all this stuff. And I'm sure, and I was in the military for 20 years, so I hardly watched any TV or any content. My content was reading message traffic and writing casualty reports on broken equipment. So I didn't exactly have a lot of time to do that. But now every kid seems to need a smartphone, and with the smartphone, there's a whole bunch of situations about looking at porn or getting crazy ideas about how to be an iconoclast, and that's not necessarily working well. But anyway, back to the trad wives. So while trad wives can be construed as a yearning to go back to when a marriage between me and my wife's black, our marriage would be illegal up until 12 years before we were born, right? The Loving decision in 1967. Up until that point, Florida was one of the worst Jim Crow states, and that's where we live in Florida. We would have been kicked out of the state um, because of our marriage, or thrown in jail, or harassed all the time. 1974 was when a woman could actually finally get a credit card in her own name, and that included unmarried women. So imagine you are in the 1950s, 1960s, and you're a woman, and maybe you're just never going to get married. Maybe you're a spinster, and that's kind of your destiny. You can't get a credit card in your own name. Think about that. Was that all that great? No, absolutely not. Uh, Again, it's about presenting this fantasy where you've got the perfect marriage, you got 2.5 kids, a car in your garage, a TV in your living room, and and a Weber kettle in the backyard, and the perfectly manicured lawn. So again, it's a fantasy, and certainly Jackie Kennedy and not wearing an apron and doing all the house chores. It's a look. It was presented in all the Norman Rockwell-esque ads and in all these commercials about what a perfect wife looks like. I mean, you can get on YouTube, you can find all the retro commercials and look at them and just go, yeah, let's be critical here. Were people actually wearing their Sunday best when they were doing everything? Probably not. Because I'm certainly, when I'm done with this video, I'm taking this penguin suit off and I'm going to get back into what I normally prefer to wear when I'm at home. Let's see here. As for my own reality, though, and this is why I want to talk about what I would consider to be a trad husband, and probably relatively unique. I mean, as a child who grew up in the 80s and early 90s, we were pretty lucky that neither myself nor my brother and sister had to be latchkey kids. My dad was a police officer and he made enough to pay for the living expenses, and my mom didn't have to work. And she would do her own uh things. She had time to explore her hobbies and stuff, at least when we were in school. So she did a lot of arts and crafts and made some money here and there at craft fairs. Uh, at one point in the late 90s, she started a LLC where she produced various scents of incense and things like that, incense and peppermints, right? She did things like that. She had time to explore, and that was great. And then for me myself, I joined the Navy and I got commissioned as an officer, and the whole time I was able to pay the whole cost of living. And I went to work and I came home, and then often I was out at sea for months at a time because that's what I signed up for. And we were able to make do on my income alone. And to be clear, my first wife did work during that whole time, and whatever she made, that was her money. I handled the living expenses, paying the bills, and everything, and she could get her funny money and do whatever she saw fit with it, and that was great. Now I understand a lot of people for the last 30 or 40 years have not necessarily had that luxury, but if you think about it, I feel like I was, in fact, for a large part of my adult life, a traditional husband. So I guess that would make me a trad husband. Never had to put the kid in daycare, never had to worry about these things. And daycare seems to be a ripoff anyway. All I hear is horror stories about how people go to work and they're barely clearing $100 extra, and they're still getting taxed on it. So they're just going to lose that money anyway. And they got to put the kid in daycare. So that's just another trip you got to make between going to work and all that. To be honest, though, being a traditional husband, and I didn't know that was a thing, but it did feel empowering. Now, uh, well, when I was still on active duty, I basically, if I wanted to get fired, I would have had to work twice as hard to get fired as I did just to be a happy, grumpy sailor. And in the 2.5 years since I retired from the military and I got my pension, got disability, uh, Wendy has her disability because she's also a disabled veteran, even more so than I am. And we can get by without doing anything else at all. Just means we might just be eating cheap ramen noodles for breakfast, lunch, and or dinner. And in the meantime, I've gone through several jobs, and every single job I've had on the outside has been a wage job. So I have to bill hours, I have to fill out a timesheet, and then occasionally get audited to make sure that I'm actually billing no more than I'm actually. Well, they'll never tell me, hey, you underbilled yourself. You worked some hours that you didn't bill yourself. No, you you get told it's pretty clear you got a 40-hour work week. You're expected to be in the office. You work 40 hours. You get paid for each of those hours. And if you take time off, then you're using sick time. But sometimes they call you on the phone and they expect you to do work that you're not getting paid for. That's the reality that civilian life, at least as I've seen it, has been like. Now back to domestic life though, and about doing the chores and everything. I look at it as a partnership, and I'm happy to vacuum, clean the dishes, sweep the floors, do the laundry. And both times I've been married, and I'm on my second marriage now, right? We split the labor, and I can say this with a smile on my face as we doze off every night, knowing that we share the chores and that we split the labor and that we are a partnership. And I imagine it was much that way in the 1950s, these commercials where the guy doesn't know how to iron his shirt because mom's sick with the flu and he's trying to do both things. Give guys a little bit more credit than that, please. And another thing, and maybe this is just something that was specific to my service in the military, is me and my buddies would always joke about the day we can retire, uh, and have the wife do all the work now and earn the income, and I get to stay home and mow the lawn and paint the house and do the other things. And that always seemed pretty glamorous, but so far it didn't work out for me, and I don't know anyone else who's actually had that work out for them unless they did 30 or 40 years in the military and they got, 75 or 100% pension. Then sure, they can do that, and they earned it. They definitely earned it a lot more than me. I'm still relatively young, so I have to go and keep on keeping on and learn new skills and things. Back to the whole 1950s thing though, I'd like to make jokes about having about these glory days. I watched plenty of Mrs. Maisel, plenty of episodes of Mad Men, and oh, great. We can joke about it. Did people actually have 3 martinis at their lunch and then go back to work? Maybe. I have no idea. Uh, did guys get away with smacking the butts of their secretaries? Maybe. But it always gets presented like it's some glorious day. I certainly don't think that personally. And then the idea that I can come home, kick my dog, drink some Cutty Sark, put my feet up on the ottoman and watch I Love Lucy and demand that my wife light my Chesterfields. I'm that's kind of the image you get when you watch some of these shows, but I highly doubt that it really ever worked that way. And as a side note, I happen to be Hispanic, and from what I know from what my grandma, who's still with us, has told me over the years, in the 1950s, the man might have been going to work and earning the money, but let's just say there is no boss like a Mexican mother. There really isn't. Ever had a chancla, uh, which is, like they take off their sandal and they smack you on the butt? Ever had that happen? It's not fun. There is no boss like a Mexican mom. Just it's very matriarchal in our culture. And that's about it. If you have any comments, please feel free to hit me up. I do make some crass jokes on social about things, but at the end of the day, I believe in egalitarianism, equality, equity, and treating each other right. That's all I have to say about that. Bye now.